everyone, all the finishers and soon-to-be finishers. My name is LiRon Anderson Bell, and I am with PR Glow Up, as well as Anderson Bell Strategic Communications. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about some of the steps I've taken to become a finisher and acknowledge and work through some of the challenges I've had specifically with things like procrastination, perfectionism, and maximizing, and how I learned to turn those, what I thought were areas of failure into areas of transformation that helped me stop being so down on myself and become a finisher, which I'm sure everyone here is looking forward to being if you're not already a finisher. So just to kind of give you some background, one of the things that I struggled with a lot was the idea that my procrastination habits somehow indicated that I was a failure. And a lot of people procrastinate. There's some research that actually talks about how humans are kind of wired to procrastinate. Some of it's not the best science, but there is some indication that it's not that bad a habit, and it's a very common habit. But one of the things we do is we beat ourselves up a lot about it. We kind of grow up being told that if we don't keep our rooms clean, if we don't keep our desks clean, if we don't get up at the crack of dawn, if we put things off until tomorrow, what we could do today, things like that, that we're doomed, that we are never going to be successful, that we're never going to become who we're supposed to be, that we're never going to step into our name, so to speak. And what happens sometimes is you get to adulthood and you kind of get to the place where you believe you're just on team disorganized and, you know, hashtag hot mess adulting and things like that. And, you know, the first thing that I just want to share with everyone who may be suffering with the habit of procrastination is, first of all, you're fine. It's, again, a very common habit. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. And there are absolutely ways to mitigate the way that procrastination shows up in your life. It does take some work. But in terms of becoming a finisher, there are steps and kind of some self-reflection that I also wanted to talk to you about. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But let me get something else out of the way first. We hear the expression a lot. I think it was Aristotle who said it. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And there's certainly an argument that it's better or maybe easier to put effort into changing negative habits. So for instance, if you desperately want to be an early riser, you can actually undergo a process of training yourself to have this new habit and, you know, gradually embrace getting up at the crack of dawn if that's something you want or need in your life. But again, that's not what I'm focused on today. Today, I want to really focus on making peace with the current snapshot of you and learning how to succeed with what you're made of right now. That was my path to becoming a finisher and increasing the speed with which I finish things. So a lot of people kind of flounder rather professionally as they chase certain behavior ideals. They kind of believe that they're mandatory for personal and professional success. And I'm suggesting that if you find yourself playing for a team disorganized and feeling out of control and exhausted with what feels like swimming upstream, you really might benefit from this attitude shift that helped me. So for starters, assessing the situation and being honest with yourself about your habits is a really good idea. So if you happen to be a procrastinator specifically, one thing you could do is, and I challenge you to do this if this is your habit, honestly chronicle how you live and work and move through your day. We spend at least a third of the day working, and work sustains the rest of our lives financially. So pay particularly close attention to recognizing your own work style. Do this for about a week. And include a weekend, so a full 7 days. And detail everything: what time you go to sleep, what time you wake up. Take note of how you feel through the day, how long you slept, what times of day you're most alert, what you spent time doing when you were lethargic. Be really granular and don't beat yourself up. It's really just a list. Don't agonize over whether it's handwritten or typed on your phone. I'll get to that as well, because surprise, I also happen to be a perfectionist and a maximizer. And so those are things that I would probably do and that I started out doing when I was trying to go through this chronicling and create a list for myself. So when you're done with that process, you'll have a snapshot of your habits, some of your defining characteristics, some of your likes, some of your dislikes, your work style. Let it sink in without judging yourself, right? This is who you are right now, and you're fine. For some people, the process may even be really liberating. Just to get it all documented is progress. For other people, especially if you've thought about these, supposed behavior ideals that'll make you successful, cataloging things in such a raw way may make you feel remorseful or shameful or guilty, or exposed and vulnerable. So if that happens, try to resist the negative self-talk or cynical opinions that may bubble up about yourself. It's just an assessment, and it's progress. It's a huge step. And it helps you begin to gain control over things by objectively identifying the behaviors that you need to balance. And that's sort of what I'm getting to. It's a question of balancing and accounting for the behaviors that you find to be slowing you down or distracting you. I do actually just want to say this. I do recognize that it's not that easy to shake self-defeating thoughts off. You can't just shrug it off, or labels that we've been conditioned to believe about ourselves. However, keep in mind, you are in control of how you feel about all of this. And this is all about learning what makes you tick. So a quick story. Again, I fully admit that I tend to procrastinate, but one of the ways that, or the main way I should say, that helped me stumble upon this process that I've used to turn the corner is that I was really just in a spiral of beating myself up about some of my procrastinating habits. I had had a series of just Murphy's Law types of incidents based on me waiting to the last minute to get some things done. Had the best of intentions, but long story short, some things didn't work out. And I went to my mother. I confided in my mother, who is a woman of countless accomplishments. She has a list as long as a city block of things she's accomplished in her lifetime. She rises with the birds. She literally makes her own clothes. She grew wheatgrass in our house when I was growing up. And I was telling her about my procrastinating habits and just really beating myself up. And she said, to my great surprise, that she too was a procrastinator, and that honestly, she thought that some people might need the pressure of a deadline to elicit their best work and to give them really clear, focused thinking. Now, first I was like, oh my God, my mother is a procrastinator. But second of all, it was kind of like a light bulb for a lot of reasons. Number one, when you have a habit like procrastination, you tend to spend a lot of time trying to not be that person. And so I was fascinated by the idea. The light bulb was that, maybe my procrastination isn't random, or maybe it wasn't definitive proof that I was just a lazy bum. Now, it happens to be my habit to follow up and research on things like that, because it's kind of a little bit like pseudoscience. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's my mother, and my mother wouldn't lie to me, but it didn't sound fully solid. And I mentioned when I first started this video that there is some science that indicates humans are wired to procrastinate, and you can look it up. I won't go into it here. But what that boils down to is that there's a segment of the population, about 25% of us, who are what it's called chronic procrastinators. And that is a very accurate description of me. And so this presented a conflict, because on one hand, some of my biggest wins, of being completely frank with you, some of my biggest wins emerged after a period of extended procrastinating. I have written account-winning PR proposals on zero sleep. I have drafted speeches for clients that I should have been working on for weeks, and finally sat down an hour before I really needed to get it done. And these speeches brought the house down, and didn't struggle was the thing. I was able to get this work done. and had clarity in those moments that was just mind-blowing, right? So it feeds itself. You don't want to be that person, but you're that person, and sometimes it works, but it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. Procrastinating, honestly, has its own perils. Your friends and your family and your coworkers and other people in your lives depend on you. And because it doesn't always work out, you can have some spectacular fails. And it can really begin to impact you in a negative way, professionally and personally. And also, just speaking to that science or the pseudoscience, there's also studies indicating that what my mother said, that some people need the pressure of a deadline to elicit their best work, well, basically it's up in the air a bit. I'll leave it at that. The point of that competing research is that people don't really work as well as they think they do under pressure. So somewhere in the middle is the truth. So that presented me with some really interesting challenges for next steps. And I share this with you just in terms of, closing out this video and some steps that you can employ in your own life to help you be that finisher you want to be. First of all, find your balance. The key for me was recognition of my habit and then understanding that I had to compensate for it. Not a one-time thing, but on an ongoing basis. So again, yes, you can take steps to actually eliminate a habit from your life if it's slowing you down or if it's just really, really, really burdensome. But you can also take the approach of seeking your balance. And that's part of what the chronicling of a week helped me do. It may take some trial and error, and the mitigating or balancing process that works for one person may not work for everyone, but I share this with you in hopes that it will. So the stumbling block for procrastinators like me is that you do a lot of busy work followed by a guilt loop because you feel bad that you've been procrastinating. You might do really mundane things like the dishes or taking out the trash instead of some really important task that needs to get done that should be your priority. And then you have this like aching guilt because you haven't done the important stuff. Sometimes you may find that really mundane set of tasks you're doing might give your mind something to focus on while you almost prepare for the task you have to do. These little miscellaneous tasks themselves don't require a lot of focus, and they do provide you with a sense of accomplishment. And so for me, when I catch myself procrastinating, I embrace the busy work on my to-do list, and I don't beat myself up for doing a couple of things here and there. And by letting myself do that, and by kind of giving myself a pass to procrastinate for a little while, but still accomplish something, I find that it drastically shortens my procrastination cycle. I stop feeling guilty about it. I stop beating myself up over it. And I'm able to approach my work or my real work, the priority things I need to be doing, with clear and organized thoughts. I mentioned also that I am a perfectionist and a maximizer. And so that is another example I want to give you in terms of being a finisher and identifying your stumbling blocks and how to move through them. So perfectionism, and surprise, procrastinators are often perfectionists as well. I'm not a classic perfectionist. I don't give up on difficult tasks, and I'm not ashamed of making mistakes. I don't avoid things that I can't do flawlessly. That's not how perfectionism shows up for me. It's really more that I become fixated on making the optimal decision, fixated on reproducing ideal conditions, and identifying the best possible choice. It also happens, and I mentioned that I work for a communications organization. It also happens that I edit and revise and write for a living. And so I've chosen a profession that actually encourages maximizing and perfectionism. But all that to say, I could spend an hour writing and rewriting and editing a simple email response. I can spend an entire day working on one PowerPoint slide. So obviously this is a waste of time. And in its most simple manifestation, perfectionism is basically the inability to realize when your continued efforts on something will yield diminishing returns. And that is I guess what unlocked it for me and allowed me to kind of work through my perfectionism and again, become a finisher. There's a gentleman associated with the Harvard Business Review, Peter Bregman, and he said perfectionists have a hard time starting things and an even harder time finishing them. At the beginning, it's they who aren't ready. At the end, it's their product that's not. So that is literally my life. And admitting you're a perfectionist is an interesting trap as well, because people think you're humble bragging or being really self-effacing and that you just have these high standards. That's honestly not what it is at all. It's actually quite burdensome. It's not an asset. You feel like you're never done. It's difficult to delegate. And you kind of are more susceptible to that toxic grind culture, this whole, I'll sleep or stop or rest or breathe when the job is done. And that's not helpful for you or anybody around you. And what's almost worse about it is that you're actively aware of how futile all of that is while you're being a perfectionist. So again, not good all the way around. So the solution that works for me, which I offer to you along with my previous solution for procrastination, is to try to unlock the pragmatist within you. For me, being able to focus on pragmatic behavior has completely turned this around. It has helped me kind of prevail in these situations. And the way it works for me is that by being, again, pragmatic, realistic, logical about the perfectionist or maximizing behavior I'm engaged in, allows me to identify the tipping point at which my behavior is starting to waste time and honestly degrading the quality of the finished product. Through mindfulness practices, I've learned to reach that tipping point a lot quicker. And so again, allowing myself that time to be a bit of a perfectionist, to be a bit of a maximizer, but then understanding that there's a point where it's like pencils down, I have to stop, I have to step away from this because I'm no longer improving the quality. That's been the way I've unlocked that particular trait and turned it into a finishing habit. I hope all of this was helpful. Again, my name is LiRon Anderson Bell of the PR Glow Up and Anderson Bell Strategic Communication. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Virtual Finishers Conference.